Hey pals, this is another After Effects demo to kind of just run through the basic functionality of using what we refer to as 2.5D or 2.5D. And the idea with that is that within After Effects there is dimensional space that you can move your objects within, but it isn't necessarily like a fully capable 3D program. But with just some sort of basic tools within the program, you can do stuff within dimension in this 2.5D, which is part of what I want you to explore for this project. Okay, so I'm in After Effects. I am going to start a new composition. In order to keep it simple for exporting and submitting work, I'm going to name it with my name, and then I'm going to call mine 2.5D demo 01. Just checking a few of the settings, the presets. HD is 1080 is good. We want it to be 920 by 1080. That's right. Square pixels, half. You can look at the size down here. Have it set to 30 seconds. This demo is going to be quite a bit shorter, so I'm going to set it to 10. And my background color is black. Perfect. Okay. So then I am going to create a new text object, and I am just going to type the word isolation. Like that. Okay, now you might notice that I have two different screens up here. So I have a left side and a right side, and that is something that you can control right here. So if yours looks like this and it just says like one view, active camera, on and on, what we're gonna do is we're gonna set this so that we can see how our things are positioned within space, not just on the flat surface here. So if I go to two views horizontal, I like horizontal because it allows me to look at them side by side. I can scroll to zoom in and out. And then within each one, I can say what it's looking at. So right now, they're both set to active camera. But this one, I can look at from the top. Now, you'll see they look the same. That's because I have not yet defined this text as being an object that can exist in 3D. So real quick, I am going to adjust a couple things here. So you can see here the anchor point is at the baseline. And really what I want to do is I want to move it so that that anchor point is in the center. Now, much like your other Adobe programs, this anchor point defines where things are going to like rotate and position based on it. So I want this one to be right in the center of my words. So here you can see in the position I have my horizontal and my vertical. Now, this is the item here where I can select that I want this to be a three-dimensional object. So I'm going to turn that on. And so now what you'll see is now I can position and scale this within three-dimensional space. So I have not only the X and the Y, but I also have the Z. Same with rotation. I have rotation along the X-axis, along the Y-axis, and along the Z-axis. You'll also notice up here that in my top view, I now see this thing from the top, and it's flat, right? It's text. There's no dimension. There's no depth to it, but it does exist in three-dimensional space. So if I move things around here, if I move it up and down, you won't see any change over here because that's from the top. However, if I move it left and right, you'll see some change there. And now if I go over here, if I grab the blue arrow, which is the Z arrow, and drag it, you'll see if I move it along the Z-axis, it's moving closer and further away, right? So getting larger and smaller. But notice that's not scaling. I'm not changing the scale of it. Like if you watch the numbers down here, I'm not changing the scale of it. I'm moving it closer to you and further away, you being the viewer. All right, so if I look at my rotations, for example, I can start checking like, okay, well, what happens if I rotate it along the X? Well, you can see there it's like rotating it forward and back, putting it back into space. If I rotate the Y, you can see that it's rotating it like further and closer away on the one side and the other, and then the Z rotates it along the blue arrow. All right. One way also to be able to control what I'm seeing and what I'm looking at is by the addition of a camera. So I'm going to add a new camera object. I like the 35mm. You can play around with these settings. You can watch some videos about what it is. And you'll see here from the top, now I have control over what the actual view looks like and where it is. So I have this thing in space, and I have this camera that I could like move around with my objects. All right, so let's say I want to do just like a little bit of an animation here. I'm going to start with the text, and I've adjusted the Y rotation. So I'm going to keyframe that and go down a few seconds here, zoom in and out, So I can go down a few seconds here, and I'm gonna rotate this back to 0 so that over the course of the time, it'll like slowly rotate in place. And then because I'm dealing with this idea of isolation, let's say I also wanna play with tracking. So I'm gonna animate the tracking amount so that as it goes, and I'll use the little shortcut here to quickly go to the next keyframe. What I want it to do is I want it to like track way out. So you'll see here now as it animates, it rotates in space, and the type tracks way out. Right, maybe I even want it to be a little further. But you'll see too that it cuts off the letters, right? Because it's happening outside of the camera. So what I also want to do then is I want to start animating the camera, and I'm going to transform its position so that as the word tracks out, the camera moves along the letters there, and I want it to end on the on. All right. Oh, and I didn't set my keyframe at the beginning, so you'll notice that it like all changed, right? Because I forgot to trap where it was at the beginning. So I could either hit undo, or I can just kind of go back like this and get it set up like right about there. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. So as that tracks out and rotates back in space, it starts to come into the frame. The camera's moving over here, you can see. The other thing that's cool about this is that the path that the camera is on is a vector path that has handles like a Bezier curve, same as what you've been looking at in Illustrator. And so now with that little bit of, and all the animation paths look like that, you can kind of like scroll in and out, or you move it so that your camera moves in and out as it's happening, right? So I have this, and then there, right? So I've got the camera moving, I've got the object moving in space. Here, what I'm looking at is I'm looking at it through the active camera, which in this case is camera 1. See camera 1 there, camera 1 there. I could have named this anything when I made the camera. It's the same thing, but this way I can like see the resources, and I can see, you know, what the item looks like. Okay, so as I get to this, you know, on, here's where I want to like finish off my message. So I'm gonna say on my own, like that. And, oops. Make this type like a little smaller there. Go back to this. Get it in there somewhere. Oh, I need to make it 3D so that it's in the camera view. Then I can like move it into the camera view there and put it somewhere like that. Okay, so what I've done is I've gotten it to where I want it to end up. But in reality, that's where I want it to end up. So I'll make that keyframe, but then like drag it down here to these last few seconds. And then really what I want to do is I want to have it kind of come in from somewhere else. So let's rotate it kind of in the opposite direction. Actually, let's have it come in from this side. Since all the other action is coming from this side, we can have it kind of swoop in, maybe like that. Let's see what this looks like. So about there. Yeah, cool. All right. So then we will start it out at this rotation, and at the end we want it to be no rotation so that it ends right how we kind of planned it. Sometimes those little bumps are weird. Maybe that little bump is too weird. Cool. And then about there, let's also have this one track out. So that as the animation finishes, all the motion doesn't end at once. So like that's there, this comes in, settles into place, kind of keeps tracking. Great. Now the only thing that's odd to me is that the the on just like sits there. And so let's do another like really slow rotation where we kind of get it rotating like the other way so that it's coming slowly at the camera for that last little bit. Cool. All right, and then you know what? I actually want this to come from the bottom more. So I'm gonna look at it, whoops, not from the back, but from the front. And let's see, we need to go back to here. You can see how quickly, like, it's easy to forget that if you're wanting to move it on the keyframes, that you need to move it like on the keyframes. So I don't want it to be in the frame at all. I want it to be kind of like that. And I want it to start a little earlier. Like I want it to start earlier basically because I don't want like all the motion to be done and then have the other motion start. I want the motion of this to kind of be happening like as this is coming into the frame. Even if it's like subtle. I'm gonna do it again. Give it some more. So that like it's not just one and then the other. Right, so that's coming in and then that's coming in and then we will adjust it again here. And let's get the tracking. And the rotation and the camera position. There, back to just the word on. All right, and then fiddle with this position a little more here. All right, we'll call it Braidwood 2.5D Demo 01. All right, so I'll save this. And once I'm happy with this, now I'm going to use the Adobe Media Encoder again to export this. So I go to Export, add to Adobe Media Encoder. If this takes a long time to open, I will make a jump cut in the edit. If you've heard any good jokes lately, feel free to send them to me. All right, it's open. Now we're just waiting. There it is. Okay, and these are the settings I want. I want the Vimeo 1080p full HD. That's perfect. Then I click here to go to where I want it to export, and it's going to be exporting it right into my project folder. So then good there. And if I hit render, this is pretty short, so hopefully it goes quick. Great. And then should be able to open our video. And watch it all rendered out. All right. Cool. So email me if you have questions, but that's the basics of using a camera and putting objects into three-dimensional space. As you can see, kind of takes a little bit of like fiddling and playing. But it does have the ability to add some really nice dimension and spatial qualities to how you're thinking about working with your typography.